So we've been talking about deepening our faith this month. That's a tough talk. You know, that's where the rubber meets the road. These talks have been about really going deeper, really getting serious with this faith tradition and really working it, you know. We've been talking all month about deepening our faith. It started off with that Bible quote, Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's what faith is. It's a substance and it's evidence. So deepening in that belief, that's powerful stuff. These are not a series of talks for cowards. You're pretty strong and pretty tough and staying with it, to be sitting in your seat all month long and listening to this, because it takes an inner strength to really deepen in the faith, really try and test the principles, really walk it and not just talk about it on Sunday. And you know, one of the things that deepening in our faith means is it means to release our grasp on the things that we think are keeping us safe, so that we can swing out into the field of infinite possibilities and grasp onto something new, something bigger, something wild and wonderful, which is the greater idea for your life. And we can't do that if we're continuing to cling to the old and to the familiar and to the well-worn path that we have a tendency to hang on to. The only thing that we can get by hanging on to what we've gotten is more of what we have. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, music. I love it. So we need to take on a grander idea of our lives in order to demonstrate a grander idea for our lives, right? Makes sense. Okay, good. Ernest Holmes said this in Creative Mind and Success: remember that God is the silent power behind all things, always ready to spring into expression when we have provided the proper channels, which are receptive and positive faith in the evidence of things not seen. With the physical eye, not seen with the physical eye, but eternal in the heavens. So remember, at the beginning of the month, we talked about the first part of that quote. We talked about faith being a substance, an actual substance of the things we pray. They use the word hope, right? The substance of things hoped for. They use the word hope. We said affirmed or prayed for. So faith is the substance of things prayed for, affirmed for, because we do affirmative prayer, and the evidence of things not seen. Proof that things in the physical world come from the unseen world. Things in the physical world have their origins in the spiritual or in the non-physical. And he goes on to say this: all is mind, and we must provide the receptive avenue for as it passes through us into outer expression of our affairs. If we allow the world's opinion to control our thinking, then that will be our demonstration. If, on the other hand, we rise superior to the world, we shall do the new thing. Wow. Now, if we rise superior to the world, he's not talking about, he doesn't mean we must think ourselves better than anyone else. What he means is we must transcend human race consciousness, the world's opinion, that human race consciousness that flows through us when we are not doing our own thinking. You know, those things like, oh, it's cold and flu season, better get my shot. You know, that's human race consciousness. There's no reason why you should get the flu other than you think you should, because you're listening to what they're saying on the radio. That's the group think. And so the limited thoughts of the world that has been convinced by its own limited thinking that the truth is limited. But it isn't. It's not true, and it's not the truth of us. When we buy into the idea that we are these three-dimensional bodies, some strong, some weak, all shapes and sizes, locked into a limited timeline, subject to effect. If we believe all of that, then we have forgotten that we are one with cause. We are one with cause. Effect is just the temporary outpicturing of our belief. And in that book, he goes on to say this. Ernest Holmes said, remember that all people are making demonstrations. All people are making demonstrations. Only most of them are making the ones they do not desire, but the only ones they can make with their present powers of perception. Making the desires that they really don't necessarily want, but the only ones that they can make with their present powers of perception. So our outpicturing can only be as big as our mental equivalent, as the thought we hold in our head about what we are capable of having. You know, it's not like you get in life what you want, you get in life what you believe you can have. That's what he was saying. So I can know in my mind all day long that God is abundance, that God is limitless abundance. But if I go to the river of abundance carrying a thimble, that's all I'm ever going to get. Okay? That's all I'm ever going to get. It's not until I expand my consciousness and I stand in the river of abundance with a 55-gallon drum am I going to realize a greater experience of abundance in my life. Does that make sense? We don't make the demonstrations of our desires, but of our present powers of perception. Our present powers of perception. So we can't think two different things that are conflicting and have anything outpicture. You know, this is what they meant in the Bible. In Matthew 6:24 and in Luke 16:13, when they talk about not serving two masters, that's what they're talking about. We cannot affirm this unlimited idea of our lives and then talk about how limited our lives are and have anything come of it. It is this, it is the same thing as the saying in Matthew and Mark 3:25. Both of those passages refer to a house divided against itself cannot stand. You can't hold two conflicting thoughts and outpicture your desires. I can't say I am one with God's abundance. I am one with my wealth and prosperity and talk to people all day long about how broke I am. It's not going to outpicture. Do you see how this is two conflicting thoughts? We cannot do that and expect there to be an outpicturing. I cannot affirm for a loving relationship by swearing all day long there's no available men/women who are good anymore in the world. Do you see how they're conflicting? We have a tendency to have a foot in each world, but we're affirming opposite things, nothing can happen. And here's one I cannot keep calling computers stupid. And continue to try to work on them. I have to heal my relationship with electronics. It's the same thing. We cannot hold these conflicting thoughts and expect to demonstrate our good. You know, that idea of we must keep our eyes singular. One thought, the highest thought, the best thought about our life. And that, is the purpose of the argumentative affirmative prayer. Right, prac students? Oh, good, yay, okay. Ernest Holmes taught there are two different types of affirmative prayer, right? There is the realization, the absolute affirmative prayer, and then there is the argumentative, which means we go into prayer, we go through steps 1 and 2. God is all there is. I am one with that. And if we can't get there by saying, this good is mine right now, we have to go through all of the reasons why we believe in our own little human minds it's not the truth of us. So that is the argumentative. And so we argue, and we're only arguing in our own minds. We're not trying to convince God of anything. God knows we're whole, perfect, and complete. So in the argumentative affirmative prayer, we go through all of those reasons why we think the good's not ours. And we convince ourselves to become single-minded and to know that the truth of us is what God knows us to be. And so through a series of affirmations and denials, we arrive at the truth. There is no other reason why I'm separate from my good except that I believe that I'm separate from my good. And so I dismiss that belief as a false belief, and I replace it with what? There is only one God. There is only one life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. That's all there is. We work through our objections. We overcome our doubts. We take on our fears, all the reasons why we can't have what we desire, and one by one, we work through them until at last we arrive at the truth. And it's a practice that expands our faith. When we can accept fully the truth of who we are, the truth that the good that we desire and we claim for ourselves is already ours, we are expanding our faith. We are expanding what we believe is possible for our lives. And our experience of life is shaped by the faith in what we believe can be the experience of our lives. Ernest Holmes did a wonderful talk. You know, he used to have a radio show called this thing called Life in the 40s and 50s. And he did this talk on February 18th. I thought it was kind of close, very appropriate. 1951. I love it. And the title was Let's Try Faith. And he said this: when the Bible said that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, it was plainly stating that our faith does actually lay hold of a spiritual power which is a real substance. It is not illusory. It is not a visionary something, but an actual substance in the universe, a power which really exists and which we can consciously use. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about affirmative prayer, laying hold to this power and directing it for our use. We are placing our faith in this power and presence that we cannot see, but that we can see the effect of in the physical world. And Ernest Holmes said, you heard in the meditation, the quote, if we could only put our faith in the spiritual laws as much as we do the physical laws, how wonderful would our outpicturings of life be? I depend on the law of gravity to hold me to the earth, so I don't float off into the atmosphere. I know it's going to happen, I know gravity's going to keep me here. I have absolute faith in the power of gravity. Okay, so what we need to do is develop that absolute faith in the power of prayer. We don't have to see it, but we know its effects. We don't see gravity, but we see its effects. I don't see the wind, but I see its effect on things that are moved by it, right? We see leaves on the trees blowing. We see dust swirling. We see papers maybe tumbling down the street. And we know it's windy out there. We don't see wind. We see its effects on those things around us. Same thing with faith. We don't see faith, but we see its effect in the world around us, changing conditions around us. That's what it does. It changes things. It changes the conditions around us. It rearranges conditions in our lives to reflect our greater thought, that greater thought that is realized by expanding our faith. Scott Adams, do you know who Scott Adams was? He's the cartoonist who draws Dilbert. Does anybody read that? Okay, Dilbert. Okay, good. Here's what he said. This is amazing. When he first started, he worked in one of those little cubicle farms. He had an office job. And he said he sent his cartoons to newspapers all over the country and got rejected by newspapers all over the country. Nobody took his cartoons. Nobody, right? And then he started writing an affirmation. He wrote this: I, Scott Adams, am a successful syndicated cartoonist. He wrote that 15 times a day, every single day for 6 months. Every day he wrote the same thing 15 times a day for over 6 months. Circumstances began to change around him in such a way that a few months after that, he got his first break as a cartoonist. Dilbert was published in 1989. He continued writing his affirmation. That didn't stop him. He continued writing the affirmations. He was published by 100 newspapers in 1991 and 400 newspapers by 1994. He continued writing his affirmations. By the year 2000, Dilbert comic strip appeared in 2,000 magazines and newspapers. in 57 countries in 19 different languages. And he attributes, in large part, his success to writing those affirmations. So how can that be? How can that be? What is that about? You know, Scott Adams was interviewed about that. In fact, he wrote a book about it. And he said he thought doing affirmations made him focus his energy on that one thing. He just kept focusing on that one thing by writing it. That spiritual practice made him focus his energy on his desire. He said it also made him commit to his practice. It forced him to commit to his practice to drawing the cartoons and to writing the affirmations. And lastly, he said that he thought that writing those affirmations every day made him more aware of subtle changes and small opportunities when they did present themselves in his life. And he was able then to take advantage of those opportunities when it popped up. That's what he thought he did. Now, I don't know if he practices our faith or not. I don't know if he's a religious scientist. Who knows? You know, maybe he has no faith at all in anything. But he expanded his faith in what he knew he could be. So maybe he wasn't affirming anything to God or about God. He was affirming that life would reflect back to him what he demanded of it. Isn't that what affirmations are? So he kept writing. He kept writing. And as he kept writing, it changed his predominant thought. And that's what we talk about always, don't we? That there is a power in the universe, that it responds to our thinking, and that it outpictures according to our predominant thought. Well, his spiritual practice of writing those affirmations day in and day out, began to seep in. From his conscious mind to his subconscious mind, it became his predominant thought. And as such, it began to make changes in the conditions of his life. So what he was doing was he was aligning himself with the truth of his being, the truth that he is that thing already, even if he didn't see it in the world, and he kept affirming it and aligning with that truth until he saw evidence of it in the physical world. I think doing those affirmations just rewired his beliefs. Right, all the way down. He started recognizing the opportunities, like he said, when it happened. He started noticing coincidences. He started taking advantage of chance happenings. His world started changing around him to reflect his predominant thoughts and beliefs. And Ernest Holmes later on in that same talk of Let's Try Faith, he said this: "We are so likely to think that some things are little and others are big, that we sometimes forget that to God, all things are possible, and that God knows nothing about hard or easy or little and big. The power that you and I are using in our prayer of affirmation is an absolute power. It is complete, perfect, and self-acting. The only big and little that resides in our own mind. There is no big and little in God." So Scott Adams, I don't know what faith he professes, if any, but he was using the power of affirmations as we teach it here. He was using that power of affirmations, the complete power of affirmative prayer that began then to outpicture in his life. Remember, Ernest Holmes said in that quote before, we're demonstrating all the time. We're demonstrating all the time, but we're probably outpicturing what we don't want. More often, because that's where our thoughts, beliefs, and affirmations are, on our limitations. And it's because we haven't yet expanded our idea of good in our lives. We have not, in our own mind, rest in the highest and best good for ourselves all the time. We must make that a practice in our lives. Whatever we decide that is. Whatever we decide that is right now. Whatever that goal is, whatever that new thing is, we have to focus on it being whole and perfect and complete right now and make a dedicated practice of it. I know we always start with good intentions, don't we? We always start January 1st. We're gonna write affirmations all day long. Or I know in November I give out those 40-day Thanksgivings, and people get, to day 3, 4, and then they get all half-assed about it. And, and then all of a sudden it's like someplace on their nightstand. They don't even know where it is after about the 5th or 6th day. It's about making a dedicated practice of this and not letting it slide and not letting it go. It's about honoring the self with the capital S, the highest and best within ourselves, and knowing we can live from that. And that's how we expand our good. We have to decide that we're committing to a practice and actually do it. Whether it's writing affirmations like Scott Adams did, or doing affirmative prayer, or focusing on a visual. If you're a visual person, focus on a visual representation. Put it up on your ceiling at night, or whatever it happens to be. Meditate on already receiving. Make a dedicated practice and stick with it when nothing happens. That time when you lose faith? After you've done it maybe, 2, 3 months, and you've stuck to it and stuck to it and stuck to it, and still nothing is happening in the physical world, and you go, this crap doesn't work. And you put it aside and you go back to the way things are. That's when you have to reinforce your spiritual practice. That's the time when you have to dig deeper. And that's what we're talking about, deepening in our faith. When you see nothing has changed on the physical level and you're ready to give up, that's when we deepen in our faith. That's when we take extra steps to continue to write those affirmations, or continue to do that affirmative prayer, or continue to visualize. That's when we double down because things may not be happening on the physical level, but they are changing on the invisible realm. Everything starts from there. Everything starts from the thought. That's the evidence of things not seen. When we finally see it showing up in the physical world, that is the last link in the chain of manifestation. When it shows up in the physical world, that's it. That's the last place it shows up. It's already coming. It's already working. The law is already at work to create that manifestation. So stuff is going on in the invisible realm of which we have no idea. That's when we continue our work. When we start doubting because nothing has changed, that's when we commit more. We stretch our faith to believe even when we don't see the evidence of it yet. We have to believe it before we can see it, right? We have to believe it before we can see it. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, faith is substance. It is evidence. It is reality. It is law, and it is order. It is a truth that demonstrates itself and provides us with evidence of its reality. If we go deeper in our faith, if we don't walk away when it gets tough, if we stick with it, even when we don't see anything changing at the physical level, that's when we are expanding our faith. We just keep on keeping on when we don't see that evidence yet. And we know that it's happening. We know that it's happening. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. There is an entire unseen spiritual universe with spiritual laws and spiritual principles that is at our disposal, that responds to our thoughts, and that outpictures according to our predominant beliefs. Don't we want to make those predominant beliefs the highest and best that we can? Yes. Thank you, God. Yes, the highest and best that we can. And that is our spiritual practice. That is our spiritual practice, so that we can expand what we know is possible in our lives. God already knows. God has already given the best and the greatest. It is up to us to accept the gift. Are you ready to accept it? Yes. Are you ready to claim your good? Yes. Thank you.